Amicia Brown, everybody. She's the real entertainer here. She's gonna be a comedian one day. I just know it.
Is he happy?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Deep Thoughts. Oh man, this is my second attempt recording this episode. I tried a week ago and my audio crashed. I couldn't save it. A whole hour and a half's worth of podcasting I couldn't save. But it's okay. I wasn't too hyped on it anyways.
And more without by and the way.
It's Easter weekend. So the kid doesn't have school. So, yeah, no school. And I don't have work.
Daddy.
All right, now it's time to be quiet.
Daddy.
And I don't have work. And it's a wonderful thing. It's truly beautiful. On this April 15th, 2022 day. Good Friday. Not bad Friday. Not great Friday. Just Good Friday. You know, if you're into that sort of thing. I really don't know much about it. I just know, I barely know about Easter. I know it has something to do with the resurrection of Jesus and, the important things like candy and eggs and Easter bunnies. I keep telling myself I really need to get back into the story of Jesus. I really do. It's something that, it's just I grew up learning about and hearing about, but I haven't done my own research. And that's what I'm all about now. I need to do my own research into Jesus. I won't talk about it. I won't talk about my personal religious beliefs, I guess. At least not this episode. But it's something I need to look into before I come to my own conclusions, right? Just like everything. Can't follow that dogma, boy. Free thought. Okay? But I love and believe in God. Absolutely. God is good. It's a beautiful day. Spring is sort of peeking through a little bit. We'll have some nice days here and there, and then some cold, rainy days. Today's a little bit cold, a little windy. Drinking the good cuppeth. The cafefe. The black gold. I never get a shot of it. People might think I'm faking. You see that black gold in there? That oil right there, buddy? That is exquisite coffee. Show the cup off a little bit here. This is from my friend's website.
Is he happy?
It's dope. About it years ago. I don't even know if he has a website up anymore. If he does, though, I'll plug it. I'll find out where I got it from because I don't remember. I don't remember the name of his website, but I'll plug it.
Is he happy?
From my good friend and fellow creator, Tony D Prophecy. Tony, capital D Prophecy. Check him out. He's crushing it on YouTube right now with all of his skits and his casts and videos that he does.
Is he happy?
I need to stop doing that. That's something rewatching these I notice I do is a bunch of ums and a bunch of terrible. So today, okay, Amicia, I gotta be quiet now, okay? So, a very big episode today. Episode 17, the best number. Hey, I'm serious. No more, okay? Episode number 17. The best number, perhaps. I see 17s everywhere, all the time. All the time. It's my number for sure. So, I thought it'd be appropriate to make it an episode about my favorite book of all time. Yes, I have a favorite book. Those who know me probably would be blown away by that. Morte D Arthur. King Arthur stuff. There I go. Away again. King Arthur. La Morte D Arthur, or The Death of King Arthur. It is a big book, big compilation of like almost every King Arthur story, probably compiled into like one or edited into like one like timeline from the birth of King Arthur to the death of King Arthur, and a lot of good adventures in between. So yeah, this is an episode that I've been working on for a long time, just because I've been rereading the book in a way. I reread a couple hundred pages and skimmed a bunch and read just a bunch of chapter titles, because the chapter titles literally tell you what's going to happen in the chapter. So it's taken me a while. I don't like reading. Those who know me know this. I don't like books. I don't like reading. I don't know why. I have a fascination with books in a way. I'm nostalgic for books. You know, I just took my daughter to the library the other day, and looking around for books had me really nostalgic from when I was a kid, when I used to go to the library and look for books. But I'm a total judge it by the cover person. So when I was a kid, I would choose books, no matter how big they were. Sometimes I chose like 500-page fantasy novels when I was like, you know, like 8 or 9. And I wouldn't, you know, I wasn't a smart kid, so I wasn't going to read it. Especially when I would get into the first couple pages and realize how boring it was, or, you know, books like that. A lot of books tend to take a bit to get into, and I just don't have the patience for that. I mean, on my ADD, it's just hard for me to concentrate on black letters on white page, and I try to imagine everything myself, and it's so much work. It's so much work. But I would just grab books if the covers looked cool. That was it, you know. And I've done that ever since I was a kid. Really, when I had to start reading in like 6th grade, really, because that's when I started school. And I had to pick out books for book reports, and we had to go to the library in school and pick out a book. I was always just going based off the covers. But I did find some good books that way. I will say I've read a few good books in my time. La Morte D Arthur is a book that took me years to read because of my ADD and not liking to read. But the fact that I kept at it and kept going back to it and kept trying to finish it, you know, shows that I really, really loved it. And it has become my favorite book of all time.
No, thank you.
So yeah, I've been trying to do some somewhat good research for this, but you know how my research is. It's flaky. Rereading this book, I realized how much I just didn't absorb or didn't remember the first time around I read it. And even I was just reading a little bit before now, and I was reading one of the, you know, like one of the, you know, earlier stories. I mean, it was like page 134 or something like that, out of like 800 pages. So in the beginning, still technically. And I was like, boy, I forgot this story already. Like, there's so many stories in the book, and it's very hard for me to remember all of them, to remember everything that happened in the book, to remember exact details, certain things that characters went through. So don't come to this if you're doing your book report or school report and an analysis of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table for my English through 203 class in sophomore college. This isn't the video for you, my friends. I'm sorry. I'm just an idiot talking about things that I like to talk about. So it's not going to be grade A work here, but I love me some knights, boy. I love me some knights and some quests and some fantasy. Look at this knight helmet that I have. Forget about the book. This is a replica Crusader helmet, as you can see. Obviously, the cross. And I got it for my birthday when I was like 14 off of eBay. And my plan was to buy like a piece of armor every year and assemble a whole suit of armor. But I just got the helmet and stopped after that. This was probably like $140 or something. I will slay thee, biatch. Yeah, I should just do the rest of the cast like this. So, knights, what's the deal? Whew. It's very big, as you can see. I think the deal is that, you know, knights will wear pauldrons on their shoulders, and that would kind of like lift it up a little bit. Also, they would have like a chainmail hood probably over their heads to, I don't know, make it not so loose on you. But that's kind of how it was, though. You put on a big old helmet and just get whacked around with a sword, and try to whack the other person with a sword until you couldn't whack each other no more. And that's how it was, folks. That's how it was. And I love it. I love the idea of armors and swords and knights and all that crap. So how did I get into this, though? How did I get into King Arthur and reading an almost 1,000-page book? Get a shot of that. Sir Thomas Malory's Morte D Arthur. This is my copy here. It's been through some stuff a little bit. I got it for Christmas in 2010, I want to say. Yeah, I was 17, and I had gotten the book. I was getting the book from the library, you see, and I seriously was checking it out, like, I just kept rechecking it out over like a 1.5 year period because it was taking me that long to read. And my mother, being the observant woman that she is, noticed this, and one day I woke up and my Morte D Arthur book was gone. I was like, oh crap, what did I do with it? I need to recheck it back out of the library, It's around Christmas time. And, kind of forgot about it, actually. And then Christmas came around, and I had a present, a mysterious present. I had no idea what it was, and I opened it up, and it was a brand new, clean copy of Morte D Arthur. And I was like, whoa, what is this? I was like, is this the one from the library, or what is, She's like, no, I took it back to the library, and I bought you your copy. And, I was so excited. And it took me probably, like I said, like 2 years after that to finish reading it. Maybe, I don't know. It took me a while. It took me a while until I was about 20, I think, to finish it. 19 or 20. I would take it to work when I was working in a call center and just read it. This book is so great because it's just adventure after adventure after adventure. And although it kind of strings it along in a cohesive timeline, it is something you could just kind of open up and just read a good story. Read a good little night story about somebody saving a damsel from a castle and their evil customs of making a woman have to bleed herself and to heal another person. And if she lives, she lives. If she dies, she dies. This is the world of King Arthur. So let's get into it a little bit. And who was the guy who wrote it? Sir Thomas Malory. He for one, it's not 100% confirmed his identity or which Sir Thomas Malory it was out of, so many Sir Thomas Malorys. Oh yeah, I didn't do coffee review. How dare I? This is a brilliant coffee. Ethiopian Sidama, I believe it's called. Ethiopian coffees tend to be my favorite, and they can be hard to come by. And this is from a great coffee shop in Kansas City called Broadway Coffee Roasters. If I get a chance, pay them a visit, pay them some patronage. Amazing coffee. They got lots of different choices. Picked up a bag of this. It's wonderful. So, so they think it's most likely, though, they did their science or whatever. They did tracking, and they narrowed it down to just a few Thomas Malorys in that time. And they think it's this knight who actually spent a good time of his life in prison, in and out of prison, for some petty crimes, for some theft, stealing, robbery, also possibly rape. May have been a rapist. I'm not 100% sure. But he was a real knight. And it's said that he compiled these stories while in prison. He was possibly also a knight from the War of Roses, which is interesting. And so he started compiling King Arthur stories, which are mostly of French origin. He was from Britain, and then after compiling these, it got to the famous William Caxton, who was a famous English merchant, diplomat, writer, book publisher. He published Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, so a real famous guy. He possibly introduced England to the printing press, so really important in that aspect of spreading literature around England. And Sir Thomas Malory's Morte D Arthur, who supposedly was the title was named by William Caxton, I think. I think Sir Thomas Malory wanted to name it some real long title, and Caxton narrowed it down. He was ahead of his time, really. He knows people don't want to read a long, lengthy title. But yeah, so it spread like wildfire and became very popular. He possibly died in prison. People are still unsure. But yeah, and it helped spread the stories of King Arthur even more. Like I said, the stories though. I mean, this book was written in like 1485, or published at least in 1485, so a long time ago. And you can tell by reading it. It's very old English, which makes it a little bit difficult to read, especially for me. Sometimes I have to, and this is with all books though, because like I said, my ADD, and sometimes it's hard for me to absorb what I'm reading. I have to reread pages in Morte D Arthur over and over again, just to be like, what? Well, what's happening? He's over here fighting a knight, and then he's in the forest, and then who's talking now? And especially with how it's written, because it's very like condensed. And I'll read an example of it in a minute, but yeah, like I said, most of these stories are from like 13th century French stories. But a lot of it branches off of, King Arthur, of course, and who he was. And that's a whole debate in itself, really. There is the Historia of Britonum, which is like the history of Britons, written in like the 10th century, which supposedly actually names Arthur as somebody who was in some battles. But people still debate on if he's a real person, if he was a real person. But let me go over how I got into it a little bit. I actually discovered King Arthur stories in 8th grade when I, again, had to pick like a book for a book report, stupid reading, and had to go to the school library, and I found an awesome looking book with a knight on it. With some knights on it, and I believe it was the Squire, his knight, and his lady. And it was in the series of teen King Arthur books written by a guy named Gerald Morris. And I read it, and it was a book that was hard for me to put down. I really got sucked into it, and so I went back to the school library to see if they had more, and they did. That was the second book in the series, I believe. And then I went back and read the first book, A Squire's Tale. And then they also had Parsifal's Paid, which was like the 4th or 5th book, and The Ballad of Sir Dinadan. And so I ended up reading all these that year, and I wanted more. Like, I tried to go to the library to search for more of Gerald Morris's books, because there was a few more in the series I hadn't read. I think the last one I left off on was the Dunkart Knight, I believe, which is about Sir Lancelot. And the thing about Gerald Morris's books is that they focus heavily around actually Sir Gawain, and not so much Arthur or Lancelot, who is more the more famous knight. And so, but I can't remember exactly how I found out about Morte D Arthur. I think I was at work or something like that, or... Well, no, I wouldn't have been working yet. I don't know. I think I was just searching, though, for like King Arthur books or stories, and I think I may have found like Wikipedia to it, and then searched to see if it was in the library in town, and it was. And, yeah, and picked it up and started reading it. It is, like I said, written in a very specific way. The Old English, how there's like so much that happens, but with very little detail, leaves you kind of having to use more of your imagination for it, which is kind of a good thing. But like I said, it takes a little more work. Like, I don't know. I could just pick out something random here. And like I said, the chapter titles, for one, it's kind of a nice read, because you could read many chapters and feel good about yourself. You'd be like, oh, I read 3 chapters today, because chapters are like literally a page. So that's like 3 pages, 3 chapters. But the titles, will pretty much tell you what's, pretty much going to happen. So here's like, and also it's separated into about like 19 books, I think, 19 separate books. Excuse me. So here's like book 3. Chapter 7. How the hart was chased into a castle and there slain, and how Sir Gawain slew a lady. It's interesting that I actually pulled it to this page, because that's a very kind of important quest, or part of the story, especially part of Sir Gawain's story. And so it's like, here's how it's written. Then Gawain and Gareth rode more than a pace after the White Hart. And that's another thing, too. This book introduced me to a lot of new words that I didn't recognize. And that being, there's a lot of common themes throughout this book. And one of the common themes in this book is like certain animals, but they have like weird names, like a hart. I never knew what a hart was, but it's like a deer. And so they chased where was I? Oh, pace after the White Hart, and let slip at the hart 3 couple of greyhounds. And so they chased the hart into a castle, and in the chief place of the castle they slew the hart. So yeah, that's kind of how it's written. So they killed the deer in the castle, basically. And so yeah, even this I would have to reread. Who killed the hart? Like, I think the greyhounds killed the hart. Okay. But anyways, I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid and get confused easily. But that's how it's written. The time period seems to... It doesn't seem to be too specific. Maybe it's just written in Sir Thomas Malory's time in a way. Maybe it does take place during the original source material of some of them, like more 12th century, or I don't know. It's a little bit hard to tell, but you do notice certain things. It does talk about the Romans and how King Arthur becomes the emperor of Rome, actually. So this is, like the end, obviously, after the Roman Empire and after everything kind of split up into all these multiple kingdoms. Okay. Oh, this thing jacked up on me again, yo. Oh, I got like 30 minutes worth that I was just talking about that wasn't recording. So, let's rewind 30 minutes. Oh my gosh, yo. This is going to make me want to just finish this really fast. Man, I can't believe that happened. I got to keep this up like at all times to see if it's still recording. That's so sad. Okay, so anyways... left off in the time period that takes place in, yada yada, whatever, after the Roman Empire. Things split up, multiple kingdoms throughout all of like Britain and Europe, and hundreds of different dukes and kings and queens, and I don't know, it's just a different time period to live in. It's interesting to think about. It's kind of all seems fantasy compared to our modern day and age, but you see some similarities too. That's all, the whole point of history, right, is going back over it and seeing just how things, kind of just change over time, like with each, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I don't care anymore, dude. I can't believe 30 minutes worth, yo. What am I? Anyways, chivalry's a big deal in this book. You hear about chivalry and you just think of knights. Chivalry. Trying to find a way to keep my notes up and Audacity. Piece of crap. I can't believe that, yo. I'm so mad. But chivalry, yeah. Chivalry's great. We're associated with knights and doing good works for people and being good to women, and it's got this romanticized idea of it, now, but it used to just mean horse soldier. That's like where it's actually drawn from. Knights, you can kind of point to knights, what they actually are, which is, interesting to think about how we got to knights. You got probably like horse soldiers and cavalrymen, with, people riding horses and armor and their swords probably can date back all the way to like Egyptian, in the first wars of time. But it was around like 9th century, kind of inspired by Charlemagne's cavalrymen, yeah. Kind of where people, he started, I guess, seeing more knights pop up, just as soldiers. But apparently, kind of got intertwined with everyday life of people trying, growing up trying to become knights. For their kings, and it got associated with going on adventures and quests. And I wonder how much of that is, based off of reality, knights doing adventures. But being a good person, it was associated with knighthood, and especially comes from Christian knights. And during this time period, Christianity was spreading. So Christianity, it has a lot to do with, this story and knights and people and influences them, how to act and how to be. So it's directly kind of related to, being good, doing good works, being a good knight, all that stuff. Charlemagne kind of has similarities to King Arthur as well. And in the beginning of the book, Sir William Caxton, he really does try to sell you on the idea that Arthur was real. As he says, there were, three great Christian kings, of Britain or of Europe. There was Alexander the Great, Constantine, and King Arthur. And, Charlemagne was a guy who, helped, after the Roman period, helped kind of unite some of Europe. And he became an emperor of Rome, I believe. And in the book, King Arthur becomes the emperor of Rome. So some similarities there. So was King Arthur real or not? People still don't know. Most people would say no. But I'd like to keep an open mind to it. He does have these similarities to other people. So it's like, is he just kind of a metaphor or a fictionalized version of multiple different kings during this period who all helped make Great Britain the great country that it became or would become? Because there's a lot in this book about, kind of just proud nationality of being British and being, part of Britain and that great kingdom and how it kind of rose to its greatness. And it has to do with this idea of a king doing it and knocking out all these other heathens in his path or whatever to unite Britain. So he does have a grave site, but a lot of people, archaeologists or whatever, believe that it was made way after King Arthur and probably just as more of a prank thing than actually the grave for a real King Arthur. But this book mentions lots of different, real places, which is why I like it too, because it's got fantasy elements, but a lot of history to it also, and a lot of real places in England. It talks about Wales, it talks about real castles like Castle Tintagel, I believe that's a real castle. Castle Dover, which is supposedly where Gawain's skull is being held, not confirmed, but so I like that. There's these little pieces that you can find that point to that, these were real people. Maybe they were all real, and this is a fictionalized story, kind of like if you were to write a book about, George Bush going to war in Afghanistan, but there's, dragons and wizards and stuff like that involved. It's you're taking these real people and maybe real things that happen, but throwing it into a fantasy and fictionalizing some things, mixing fiction and nonfiction. That's kind of how I like to think of it, as a mixture of fiction and nonfiction, but some people would have you believe that it's all just poppycock, all just rubbish, and just fun fantasy stories. So yeah, let's get into some badass stories about badass knights. Yeah, man, adventures and questing and treasures. Oh my. So, this book, has a lot of different characters, a lot of different knights. Arthur's knights grew to the hundreds by the end of his days. And I am not going to remember all of them, but of course this book doesn't even talk about all of them, but it talks about some main ones, some main players, the most important ones. You got King Arthur, of course, who was the son of Uther Pendragon. Pendragon was this great big king, and he had this advisor, this shady, mystical guy named Merlin, the famous Merlin. And, he was always kind of giving him advice, and Merlin's good at predicting things. He's good at prophesizing things. Kind of seems like sometimes Merlin's just pulling the strings in the back, kind of making things happen his way. Because Pendragon, he goes to Merlin, he's like, hey, there's this lady named Igraine, I believe, right? Yeah, Igraine, and he really wants to bang her. And so he's like, how do I do this? How do I sleep with her? And Merlin's like, well, I'll tell you, but if you have a son, you got to give him to me. And Pendragon's like, okay, sure, why not? And obviously Merlin knows there's something, to do with Pendragon's son. He knows he's going to be a great king or something one day. And so he tells Pendragon, oh, the only, the way to sleep with her is to dress up like her husband and trick her. And Pendragon's like, okay. And so that's what he does. And you'll find that's a common thing in this book, too, that happens. People dressing up like others and tricking people just putting on another knight's suit of armor and just tricking everybody, especially tricking women. Very easy to trick women. And so he tricks her. She sees Pendragon, thinks it's her husband, sleeps with him, finds out it's Pendragon, and is like, oh, okay, well, whatever, that's cool. We're gonna, she has Arthur, and I think she's just more happy the fact to have such a a child that's supposed to be destined to be great, or maybe she doesn't know that. I can't remember. But Merlin, so he takes Arthur like he's supposed to have part of the deal, but he ends up giving him to Sir Ector, one of the OG knights in the story, and Sir Ector raises Arthur along with Sir Ector's real son Sir Kay, who's kind of becomes his brother, Arthur's brother. And so he raises Arthur to a teenage boy, and Arthur, is already showing that he's showing some promise. To be a good young warrior, a good king. And he's in this like jousting tournament or something like that with Sir Kay. And Sir Kay loses his sword, so Arthur goes and finds a sword for him, and this is where he finds the sword in the stone, the famous sword in the stone story. There's a sword in the stone, no knights can pull it out. Arthur, just looking for a sword for his brother, Sir Kay, just like, oh, look at that sword in that stone. They're perfect. And just pulls it out easily. And everybody finds out about this. They put it back in, to test this out. And other knights try it, and they can't get it. And then King Arthur pulls it out easily again. Destiny. So he is then kinged. Deemed, the guy who should be the king of the people. But other kings are not cool with that, so they all try to fight him, and he has to fight off all these other kings and ends up taking off over these other lands. And he puts certain people in power of these lands that he thinks will be good rulers, and he makes everyone rich. And it's said that he's even praised by the rich and the poor. And so by taking out all these other kingdoms, he unites Great Britain, becomes the greatest king ever. The end. Now he even ends up, like I said, being the emperor of Rome, as he's asked to fight for their truage. And he's just praised everywhere he goes. And again, it's kind of comparable to Alexander the Great, who on his conquests was taking over lands and having his armies slaughter other armies. And it kind of brought a lot to Europe. And I don't know that much about Alexander the Great, but all those things that kind of ended up creating. Okay, just wait till I'm done. Okay. With the forming of the Roman Empire, it's kind of like, war is a disgusting thing, but it's so normal. It's crazy how normal it is, and how it's been a part of human culture since the beginning of time to gather an army and go kill a bunch of other people to take their lands. And it's like, well, the Roman Empire, throughout all that, it did end up being a pretty great empire. It did end up, allowing lots of people to live happily and pretty freely for a long period of time until it crumbled, like everything apparently does. So it's like, was it for good, in the long run? It's like, the discovering of America, had a bloody, ugly beginnings, but it's, turned into this thing that, lots of people are living here and are happy and stuff now. So, I mean, that's a good thing, right? But that's kind of how Arthur's just looked at totally in the bright light, in the positive light, as, whereas if we saw that today, our leaders started just taking out country after country after country and making it a part of, America or whatever, or have you, it would probably look pretty tyrannical. So it's kind of hard to spin that in a positive way now, but it was a positive thing then, I guess, depending on your perspective, what you're looking at. Yeah. Did I talk about the Anglo-Saxons? I can't remember because I lost my recording. I don't know. Like I said, this takes place, I think, like kind of around that period of time where the British were fighting the Anglo-Saxons, and that's a real historical thing you can look into. The real Arthur may have been really a part of. But by defeating the Anglo-Saxons, again, is one of those stepping stones to making, Britain becoming what it became. This great country. This great, strong, powerful country. So that's how King Arthur starts out, becomes a king, and then he gets, he starts off his little round table of knights, starts off small, just, his brother Sir Kay, he makes the seneschal. You got Sir Baldwin, Sir Ulfius, and Sir Brustius. And by the end of his days, that knight goes to hundreds. The number of knights goes to the hundreds. And so, becoming one of King Arthur's knights becomes like a thing that people kind of live for. Now everyone's kind of coming to his court in Camelot to try to become one of his knights. This is how he's introduced to people like Sir Tor. Sir Tor is an awesome knight. He's very moral. He shows people mercy. He tries to let people live. He was adopted by a poor guy, so he kind of grew up poor. One thing you'll find, and I'll talk about later, I guess, is like the lineage of these knights. A lot of them are special and come from special lineages. And you think Sir Tor doesn't. You think he's just comes from a poor family, and that's what they think, but they end up finding out that he's actually the son of King Pellinore. So he is the son of a king. But, this guy takes him to King Arthur's court. They knight him. He goes on quests, earns his stripes. He goes on one quest to fetch a brachet, another thing that I can't remember what that is, like a dog or some kind of animal. Or a bunny, maybe? I can't remember. You just don't know. He tries to fetch a brachet, and he fights a knight for it, and this lady, he's going to let this knight live, but the lady's like, no, he's bad, cut off his head. So Sir Tor's like, okay. And he cuts off his head. Sir Tor's awesome, very moral. He's a good knight. You also got Sir Gawain. He's kind of in the beginning here. And Sir Gawain, he's kind of a shoo-in because he's King Arthur's nephew, so he's already kind of in. But, he goes on lots of quests early on. And like I said, Sir Gawain, he's my second favorite knight. I always have a soft spot for good old Gawain, even though this book and other stories too about him kind of show him more of in a negative light. Like knights in this book, they're good knights because the dialogue used by Thomas Mallory or possibly William Caxton, whichever one, and they'll just praise the crap out of a knight. Oh, Sir Lancelot, the greatest knight of the world. Oh, Sir Bors, he was the greatest knight ever, never lost a battle. Oh, Sir Tristram, he was the greatest of the greatest knight ever, swear, greatest knight. And then Sir Gawain really doesn't get any of those titles. He doesn't win all of his fights. That's a big indicator. Like, if a knight is special because they'll win every single one of their fights, pretty much. That's not Sir Gawain. He does do some questionable things. He does. He meets this knight, Sir Pelleas, and Sir Pelleas talks to Gawain about how he's missing his lady Etard, and so Gawain's like, oh, I'll go get her for you. Give me your armor. I'll disguise as you. For whatever reason. He's like, okay. And so Gawain, wearing Sir Pelleas' armor, goes and finds this lady, and she's like, oh, Pelleas, I've been missing you. And he takes off his helmet. He's like, no, actually, I'm not Pelleas. And she's like, oh, well, then you must have killed him if you have his armor. And Gawain's just like, yeah. Put it back. Yeah, I killed him. And she's like, okay, well, I'll be with you. And he's like, okay. And so Sir Pelleas is like tired of waiting around. He goes out and tries to find Gawain, and he catches him sleeping with his lady. And I can't remember what happens after that. I was just reading that story, but I didn't finish it right before this, actually. And Gawain, he doesn't kill Gawain, obviously. I think the knight maybe killed himself. Not a great look on Gawain. He also becomes known as like a lady killer. All because he's trying to fight this knight, and when he's about to deliver like the final blow to him, this lady gets in the way to protect that knight, and he ends up killing the lady instead, which he feels just terrible about. But it basically curses him as this lady killer, and he's supposed to vow to be good to all women till the end, and that's mostly Gawain's story. He kind of becomes a rival to Lancelot. He's kind of also brash and kind of just jumps into things without thinking too much. So, like I said, they kind of don't show him in a great light. He is a part of a really old poem called The Green Knight, a really famous one, which just became a movie recently, starring Dev Patel, the great Dev Patel. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I heard some iffy things about it. And supposedly it really shows Gawain as not a good guy. And that's not fair because in that story, I mean, the only thing he does is he stays in a castle in this story, right? If you don't know the Green Knight, basically a guy in a green armor comes to Arthur's court. He's like, somebody hit me, and then in a year from now, I'm going to hit you. Like, I don't know, it's this weird game. So Gawain chops his head off, literally, with his first blow, and this knight survives it. And he's like, okay, I'm going to come back for you in a year. And Gawain goes on these adventures in the meantime, and he stays at this castle where this guy and this lady, and the lady makes moves on Gawain, and he turns her down, like, time after time, until he finally lets her kiss him. And then she's like, okay, if I can't do anything else with you, let me give you this ring. He's like, no, I can't take that ring. Wouldn't be right. And so she's like, okay, well, let me give you the sash. And he's like, okay, I'll take the sash. Okay. Not the brightest people, these knights. But, and so, he meets the Green Knight again after a year. Green Knight delivers his blow to Gawain. Gawain survives it. The Green Knight ends up being Morgan Le Fay, I believe, in disguise, and was like, oh, moral of the story is you should not have lied to that guy about the sash. Like, that's the big thing he did. He lied about taking the sash from the lady. Like, and there's an article I'll link to where, kind of links Gawain with misogyny, and he gets a bad rap, I feel like. I don't know. He's still my second favorite. That's my boy. I love me some Gawain. I don't know, just different perspectives depending on the story or the source material you're reading of. But it's interesting how there are a couple different perspectives of, like, Gawain, like in a good light and in a bad light. Because like I said, the story is all about being good. And, just because you're a knight definitely does not mean you're good. And that's one of the reasons why I love these stories so much and why I love this book. Because nobody is perfect. Except for Sir Galahad, he's perfect. And Sir Percival, he's pretty perfect too. But other than that, nobody's perfect. So, you got Gawain. He fights Lancelot in the end. We'll get to that. You got Balin Le Savage, good old Balin. He's the knight with the two swords, because he goes to Arthur's court where this lady's there, and she's got a sword in a scabbard. She's like, nobody can pull this sword out of the scabbard. Balin Le Savage does, and she's like, oh, cool, well, give it back to me. And he's like, nah, I'm going to keep this sword. And so he's like, dual-wielding swords. He's a pretty cool character. And she's like, okay, well, if you keep that sword will be the death of you. It's cursed. And he's like, okay, crazy lady. So he goes on to, like, adventures. And it ends up being the Lady of the Lake, too. Who's a famous person in this. This knight named Lanceor, he tracks down Balin to try to get the sword back. But Balin defeats him. Balin has a brother named Balan. I don't know, it's a little confusing. You got Balin and Balan. They're real tight. They're real good brothers. They go on quests together. Merlin convinces them to try to kill King Rience for Arthur. This king who's like, fighting Arthur at the time. And they go and kidnap him, actually, and bring him to King Arthur. And there's also this invisible knight during the story. Like I said, kind of like there's the fantasy kind of bleeding into this. And a knight that actually can turn invisible somehow. He goes on a killing spree, just killing knights. A lot of times around Balin. Balin will just be talking to this knight or something like that, and this lady, and all of a sudden the knight will get killed by this invisible knight running by. And Balin's like, darn you, invisible knight! And he tries to chase him. He ends up finding him at this castle where he doesn't know he's actually going to be at, but the knight shows himself and pretty much brags about, like, yeah, I'm an invisible knight, I've been killing people, ha. And Balin's like, it's you! And so he actually sticks a truncheon in him. I think it's like a spear, and kills him there. He ends up in another castle with this custom where he has to fight another knight, and he has to change his shield out. So he's using a different shield, and he fights this other knight. They fight each other to the death, and right before they die, Balin pulls off the helmet of the other knight, and shocker, it's his brother, Balin! I don't know, I always love that story, because that is a real twist right there. And the only reason why Balin didn't know it was his brother was because he had a different shield. Again, these knights are very easily tricked and stuff like that. Their armor and their shields are big signifiers of who you are, especially if you have a helmet on and you can't see their face, I guess. That would make sense that your armor is something that identifies you. But, they end up killing each other, and it's really a real sad story. And there's a quote from the book, too, when they're going to go get King Rience. Balin tells him, I will well that we do, and we will help each other as brethren ought to do. Such a good line. I don't know, they're tight brothers, but it's sad that they killed each other in the end. But it's a good story. One of the first stories in the whole book, actually. You got Sir Tristram. He's a real famous knight. He's a French knight. Sir Tristram, he's got a whole name. I can't remember what it is. Sir Tristram something. Sir Tristram de Lions, I think that's what it is. He's a knight that is from France. He plays a harp. He just right off the bat, it describes him as big and strong from an early age, and becomes one of the best knights in the world. He's born from King Meliodas, whose wife died giving birth to Tristram in a forest while she was trying to rescue her husband from prison. And I think Sir Tristram, I'm pretty sure somewhere in the book it says how guilty he feels about kind of killing his mom by being born. Kind of a tragic thing there. He fights for Cornwall's truage against a knight named Sir Marhaus. He ends up being rivals with this other knight, Sir Palomides, and they fight tons of times throughout the book in some really good battles. He falls in love with a lady named La Belle Isoude. I think that's her name, and yeah, he just there's like 3 books on him. There's tons of Sir Tristram. If you're a Sir Tristram guy, lots of good stuff in Morte D Arthur about him. And he is good. He is one of my favorites too. He's awesome. He's just one of those knights, so that's like too good. He never loses. He even beats King Arthur, I think, one time. I think the only person he loses to is Lancelot. Even though Lancelot says that Sir Tristram is the best knight in the world, even though other people would call Lancelot the best. Lancelot himself admits that Sir Tristram is the best. There's a part where Sir Tristram actually goes mad and goes crazy and starts running around in the woods buck naked because he finds these letters from this other knight, I think named Kedrius, who was professing his love for La Belle Isoude. And Sir Tristram thought, they were lovers, even though La Belle Isoude never even saw the letters. And jumps out a window and goes crazy. And he ends up riding around a lot with my favorite knight of all time, Sir Dinadan. Sir Dinadan, he doesn't have much to do in this book, though. I heard about him, like I said earlier, through one of Sir Gerald Morris. Gerald Morris's books, who Gerald Morris wrote a whole book on Sir Dinadan called The Ballad of Sir Dinadan, which ended up being my favorite of the books. Just because Sir Dinadan has a lot of personality. He's a funny, goofy knight. He's a minstrel, so he plays music. But yeah, that's why Sir Dinadan ended up being one of my favorite knights. So I was really looking forward to reading about good old Sir Dinadan and Morte D Arthur, just to find out he's barely in it. They introduce him around Sir Tristram, and him and Sir Tristram end up just kind of being friends. I don't know why. They just kind of connect together real well. And, there'll be instances where they'll find, knights to fight, and Sir Dinadan will get his butt whooped. And he's kind of a whiner too, kind of whines a lot, but he's still known as like the humorous knight. And I don't care. He's still my favorite. But he's like, he's like, I don't know why him and Sir Tristram just have a good like relationship, become buddies. But he's like, Sir Dinadan's like one of the only people that knows of Sir Tristram being out in the woods, being all crazy. And that is a big part of Gerald Morris's book too about Sir Dinadan, how Dinadan kind of helps Tristram out there. But yeah, Master Tristram gets Christian in the end. He lives happily ever after with La Belle Isoude. He's got a real happy ending to his story. Him and his rival Sir Palomides become friends. The Sir Tristram saga is a really good one for sure. That's Sir Dinadan. The only cool thing that Sir Dinadan does in the book really is he makes a song about this guy King Mark who ends up trying to kill Sir Tristram, I think. And Sir Dinadan makes a little diddle making fun of King Mark, and he sends this minstrel to King Mark to sing it to him by surprise in front of everybody. So it ends up being like a really embarrassing thing to King Mark. But yeah, that's the coolest thing Dinadan does in the book. Oh, we got, of course, like the most famous knight of all, Sir Launcelot. He's the son of King Ban, and he's prophesied by Merlin to be one of the best knights in the world. And he's one of the most popular knights, especially because he comes from the French stories. So he's like the French knight, really. Sir Tristram is literally the French knight, but I think Sir Lancelot is really popular in the French stories. He's deemed the flower of all knights. he's got, tons of Lancelot stuff in the book. Most of the book has to do with him, really. And all of his quests and deeds. He's always doing the good things, saving the ladies, saving the prisoners, defeating the bad guys, all that stuff, winning all the jousting tournaments. Everyone's always like, oh, you're the best knight in the world. It's Lancelot. But what's interesting about his character is about how good he is and how dedicated to being good he is. But he has this one flaw, this one drawback. And he has the hots for Guinevere. Guinevere is King Arthur's wife. So he, dedicates himself to being Guinevere's personal knight, but, they get a little bit too close together, and they hide it from King Arthur. So you got this one thing kind of holding him back from being this perfect knight. And when we get to the quest of the Holy Grail, it's the one thing that holds him back from achieving that quest and making him pure enough. There's a point in time where he goes mad as well. I don't know, knights going crazy. Knights be crazy sometimes, man. It's a stressful, crazy life for a knight. Especially once their affair is found out. Once their affair is found out towards the end of the book, Guinevere is found of treason. They try to burn her. Lancelot, disguising himself as Sir Bors for whatever reason, he uses Sir Bors' armor to go save her from being burnt. And then he flees to his castle. I forget what it's called. What was his castle called? Castle de... I can't remember. He's got his own castle somewhere. And he ends up going to war with King Arthur in the end. So, very important to the whole story. One of the most important, famous knights of all. We also got his... But he bears a son named Sir Galahad. And another one of his, kind of flaws, one of the bad things that he does, kind of bad, although you'd argue it's not that bad, because he sleeps with another woman named Elaine. And, in his mind, he loves Guinevere only. So it's bad to him, but his love for Guinevere is the bad thing. So it's kind of it's better you go get with this other lady than Guinevere. But he's tricked. Knights be stupid. Elaine disguises herself as Guinevere by the advice of this other lady, this Dame Brisson or something like that, I think is her name. She's like, oh, you had to get with Lancelot. He only loves Guinevere, so you got to disguise yourself as Guinevere. And somehow she does. Tricks Lancelot. Lancelot sleeps with her and then finds out what he's done and is just horrified by it. But she ends up bearing his son, Galahad, who is also prophesied to be the greatest knight in the world and the one to achieve the Holy Grail. Early on, Merlin calls that. But Lancelot leaves and he doesn't raise Galahad. But there is a point in time where Galahad's taken to a chapel to be knighted, and they go find Lancelot, and they're like, we need you to knight this knight, or christen him, or whatever. To knight him, and Lancelot does it, but he doesn't know who it is. He doesn't know it's his son. He doesn't find out it's his son until way later on the quest of the Holy Grail. So Galahad is the perfect knight. He's the one. He's what Lancelot couldn't be. He's the pure version. He doesn't do anything wrong. All good deeds. Perfect. Becomes the greatest knight ever, winning all of his battles. He gets the shield of Joseph of Arimathea, who I'll talk about too at the end of this. And that's a shield with a red cross on it. So it becomes a really famous shield. That's Galahad. We also have Sir Perceval, my third favorite knight. And he's another one that's just perfect. And actually, in the original stories of the Holy Grail, Sir Perceval is the one who achieves it, not Galahad. Sir Perceval is just awesome. He's, very dedicated Christian man. Very much into Jesus and does all of his works for Jesus, And so that's why he's known as the purest knight ever as well. There's actually a quote in here from the book. And as the tale telleth, he was one of the men of the world at that time, which most believed in our Lord Jesus Christ, or Jesus Christ. For in those days there were but few folks that believed in God perfectly. So that's Perceval. Awesome knight. Awesome guy, one of my favorites. And so we also have Sir Bors. He's one of like the best knights in it. I mean, there's so many knights. You got Gawain's brothers, Sir Agravain, Sir Gareth, who he has a story where he's first named Sir Beaumains, and then they find out it's Sir Gareth. Or is that Lacote Maletail? No, Lacote Maletail is another knight. I get them confused for some reason. Sir Beaumains and Lacote Maletail, because Lacote Maletail was a knight that was like the like a kitchen boy, or is that Sir Beaumains? I get those stories confused. One of those knights was like a kitchen boy at first. Only one of the other couple of examples of somebody not being from lineage. Yeah, I think it's Sir Beaumains. Sir Beaumains like the kitchen boy. He gets like made fun of by Sir Kay for it, and that ends up being Sir Gareth. So he's not really just some poor kitchen boy. He actually is from King Lot of Orkney. He's Gawain's brother, so he still is from like a royal lineage. Like I said, like all these knights are pretty much from royal lineage. Rarely ever is there just a random peasant who becomes a knight. Yeah, so many knights, so many knights. Sir Lionel, Sir Lamorak. Oh man, so many awesome knights. And like I said, it's awesome just to open this book and just start reading about them and their adventures that they're on. There's just so many different quests and adventures. A lot of them, start to become really similar. It's kind of like playing like an RPG, and the quest is constantly, go fetch this, go fetch the item, go to the dungeon. Because that is kind of what they do. They just travel, they meet a knight, they fight him on the highway, they find a castle. The knights of the castle try to fight them. They fight each other. Sometimes they get taken prisoner. Sometimes they're saving prisoners. Sometimes they're saving damsels. Sometimes they're chasing hearts, deer, questing beasts. It's awesome. It's all awesome. It's fun to find like your favorite knight and read about them. And there's just so many knights and stories about these knights in this book. Endless. Well, not endless, but you know what I mean. Lots of fun. So then we finally get towards the end, and the coup de grace quest, the Holy Grail, which everyone's heard of, the Grail that Jesus himself sipped out of during the Last Supper, or something like that. It's actually a story written about 1190 by Chrétien de Troyes, and it tells of Sir Perceval achieving the Holy Grail, also known as the San Grail, which is how it's written in this book. How this quest becomes about is it's during Pentecost. People, this is where things like really start to bleed into fantasy too. There's so much about birds and stuff flying into the windows and the bright light and an angel holding the Holy Grail in front of everybody. And so at Pentecost, the Holy Grail makes an appearance. Some knights and all the knights are treated with some of it, and kind of gives them like a little taste of it. Galahad shows up. And then the Holy Grail goes away. And Arthur's like, we need to achieve this Holy Grail. And Gawain is like, yes, let's do it. And then, so like 150 knights vow to find the Holy Grail. And then Arthur gets sad about it. He like flip-flops and he's like, I wish all these knights weren't going to find the Holy Grail because none of them are going to come back alive. They're all going to die. And then he's like, this is your fault, Gawain. He like blames Gawain for it for some reason. It's weird. So these knights start off the Holy Grail. Some of the first knights it talks about on their quest is Sir Gawain and Sir Ector, and part of their quest, Sir Ector actually has a dream that he kills Sir Uwaine, one of the knights, but actually it's Gawain that ends up killing him in real life on their quest. And both are deemed not holy enough to the Holy Grail, so by a ghost in a chapel. So much like I said, like it starts to bleed into fantasy. Lots of ghosts start popping up. It's a really good adventure for sure. Plays just like a video game. And so they are turned away and they're not pure enough. So then we follow like Sir Perceval. He has some dreams about like a snake fighting a lion, and Perceval saves the lion, but then the lion ends up being evil. And so this is supposed to signify him being tricked by Morgan Le Fay is the lion, and tricks him into killing the snake, who ends up not being the bad one, I guess. I don't know, that's what he like learns from the dream. That's what he kind of experiences on his quest to the Holy Grail, from what I remember. Then we go to Sir Bors, and he finds a hermit who cleanses them and says that he can't eat from the Holy Grail, or he can't eat at all, or something like that, until he finds the Holy Grail. This hermit also gives him a scarlet coat to signify his chastisement. And so Sir Bors is tempted by women on his quest and always turns them down because he's got to be pure. He has like dreams also about like white buffalo and black buffalo, and he's told, every time these knights have these dreams, and they go find a church and they find like somebody there to interpret these dreams for them. And basically he's told like, the white buffalo is like the pure one, but he's surrounded by the black buffalo, the impure ones, and the white buffalo is basically Galahad. And so Bors, Percival, and Galahad all meet up together, and they find each other on a boat, and Percival's sister is with them as well. Again, I'm probably leaving out lots of details, so just bear with me. This is my interpretation of the story. These are the notes that I took, okay? But they find each other on a boat, and then this gets into all this storytelling where they find like a scabbard where a sword was in, and the scabbard has all this gold writing on it, and they find these these papers and documents and writings to tell the story of these other knights that tried to achieve the Holy Grail and failed and died in this ship and were cursed. And even a ghost again pops up telling them these things. So Galahad, of course, is the only one that can use this cursed sword on this ship, so he takes it. Then the three separate and go on their own adventures. Galahad finds another ship, lots of ships being boarded onto as well during this time, where he finds his dad, Lancelot, has been on for quite some time. And so they get to unite with each other finally and hug and kiss and all that good stuff. And they live with each other for like a whole year on this ship. Until finally another ship comes, and Galahad's like, I gotta get on this ship. And so they depart. Lancelot ends up going to Castle Carbonek, where he finds the Holy Grail before everyone else. And he's basically told, like, because of this whole Guinevere thing, he is not pure enough for the Holy Grail. And so he has to turn back. On that ship that Galahad gets on, Percival and Bors are on this ship as well. So they unite together, and they all three go to Castle Carbonek, where, again, Bors and Percival are basically told they're not pure enough, even though there's really nothing to indicate why they're not. But Galahad is the chosen one. He's fully fed with the Holy Grail. Jesus talks to them face to face about how he's the best. And, this is just such a good, this is just such a boner for themselves, This is like just stroking their own ego. Like, imagine if Galahad was the one who wrote this story, and Galahad got to talk to Jesus, and Jesus was like, yes, Galahad, you're the best. You're the best one ever, Galahad. See, Jesus thinks I'm the best. I don't know. It's kind of cool to think about how, people were imagining these stories, and this is like things that maybe, they really wanted to live through, like these real authors or maybe real knights back then, I can imagine people reading that Holy Grail story and being like, man, that would be awesome, if somebody went on an adventure for the Holy Grail, I wonder how many people really tried to do that in real life. And like I said, I gotta look up more about, do more research on how much of this was like real nightlife, nightlife, like knighthood life, like how much of it was about going on quests and receiving treasures and gold, or I wonder, since people were really writing stories about all these things, they must have been trying to live vicariously some way through some means, or glamorizing their own lives in a way of being a knight. And like I said, the whole Christianity aspect has so much to do with it. Like, if you're already like a good Christian warrior and you're doing everything for Jesus, it'd be probably fun to imagine you doing something so good that it gets praised by Jesus himself, and you get to have a conversation with Jesus and to solidify how good you are. That must have really been in their minds back then. And I don't know. I love to imagine now, with the, some of those aspects of life. I don't know. Maybe it's just my autism or something, but I love to escape reality in a way. to these kind of worlds, to these fantasy worlds. And it's kind of fun to imagine, that maybe I'm a knight, this is my quest, my journey on life, right now. And I'm constantly making decisions, as these knights do, to try to make the best decisions and try to be the best I can. And I make mistakes, and I'm not a perfect person. But, through God, through prayer, through, those are my personal things that I do. I try to keep going and try keeping to better myself. And if I ever get an opportunity to fight for a woman, I hope I do, Maybe that'll be metaphorically, maybe it will be literally, and I'll have to beat somebody up because they talk bad about my wife. I'll have to go slap somebody because they made a G.I. Jane joke. You just don't know. You don't know what's on your journey, what's going to be on your travels as a knight. I don't know. And thinking about life that way makes it a little bit more fun and interesting, I guess. But there's also real connections. There's real connections to today's life with back then, or things that we could draw from back then and apply it to now. I think, just that internal struggle in general of trying to just be the best person you can throughout your life, using your time wisely, to do good things and do good acts. And that's not a horrible way to live even today. But is it achievable? Again, nobody's perfect. I don't think there is a Galahad, really. I don't think there is anybody on this world that would be pure enough to achieve the Holy Grail, but it's fun to think about. So, in summary, oh wait, I didn't even get to, that's not the end. So, you have the quest of the Holy Grail. It's achieved. Galahad achieves it. They all go back. They all are happy. King Arthur's happy with what knights at least got to make it back, and they party and feast. And then that's when Sir Mordred, King Arthur's son, comes into the picture and ruins the party by snitching on Lancelot and Guinevere and, telling of their affair. So, all right, just wait. I'm almost done. So this causes, like I said, Lancelot to flee. They try to burn Guinevere for treason, but he does save her. And she ends up having to flee and run away. Because King Arthur's not having it. And you can't blame him. And so Mordred's like, you got to go to war with Lancelot. And King Arthur's like, you're right. And so they get, armies ready. And I guess, because it's like, well, Lancelot has an army? And he must have, because they fight in a battle against each other. And Gawain is in this battle. And he ends up fighting Lancelot. And Lancelot ends up chopping off his head. Hence why his skull is supposed to be in Dover Castle. But after this, Lancelot doesn't feel good about it. King Arthur doesn't feel good about it. And King Arthur kind of wishes he didn't go to war with Lancelot. Lancelot kind of wishes he didn't have an affair with Guinevere. And things end ugly. The battle ends, though. Nobody really wins. Arthur gets hurt in battle and killed, but before he dies, I guess he realizes like that was Mordred's plan. Mordred just wanted Arthur to go to war to die, so Mordred could take over the throne. And so he sets himself up to take over the throne, and Lancelot goes and does his own thing solo for a while, and Guinevere becomes like a nun, and they live out the rest of their years like this until Lancelot finally searches Guinevere out, and he finds her dead actually. She's already dead in this castle. He buries her, and then Lancelot's just so sad and depressed after that he ends up dying, grief-stricken, and that's how they die, and everyone dies in the end. And that ends the tale and the life of King Arthur. Pretty sad, man. It's a great story though. So yeah, in summary, it's like, was this all real or not? There's definitely a blend of fiction and nonfiction going on. I kind of believe King Arthur was maybe a real king, and maybe they're just trying to hide King Arthur, Like I said, there's this whole thing about being a proud Briton, and I just wonder, sometimes we look down on nationalism, being proud of our nationality or our countries that we come from, especially if other people deem them to be bad or to have a bad history. You're not supposed to be proud of where you're from. I don't know. I think everyone has something a little bit to be proud of. Every nationality and ethnicity or group of people has kind of overcome strife and struggle. And, the British people, yes, you could say there were just white people in Europe, doing white people things, but there was a lot of, like I said, being ruled by rulers and being ruled by bad kings. And so when you get a good king that comes up and is like, I'm going to be for the people, people rally behind them. And, they look at someone like King Arthur as a real hero then, and who's good to their people. And so it's good that he became king. And, like I said, that supposedly, lifted Britain off and set them up for greatness for a long time. And that was good for a lot of people, who were being oppressed back then, just by their kings and queens and their rulers, So, like I said, a lot of this is drawn from Historia Britonum, and it says that Arthur led the British in the Battle of Badom. That's what it is, Badom, against the Anglo-Saxons. And Arthur has many wars in this book, but never mentions that battle in the Morte D Arthur. But they also say that he is just based off of other people, possibly a Roman officer. And there's so much going on in Europe between 6th and the 10th century. Like I said, the fall of Rome and the rise of Britain, the Anglo-Saxon War. And so Arthur is really seen as a hero to Britain. But like I said, I don't know if he's just made up. Maybe they made him up to be like a rallying cry for Britons, I don't know, because like I said, it's just blended with too much nonfiction. It really is, If this was a story about a king and the fairy fantasy land of elves, and they helped the fantasy land of elves free the other elves, and all this other complete fantasy rubbish, I'd be like, yeah, no, probably not real. But the fact that they're trying to say like, no, King Arthur, freed kind of the British people from, this post-Roman empire of just corrupt kings and rulers, and became like one of the first good kings of Britain. That's just too real, man. I mean, why would somebody just make that up? I don't know. I don't know. But I would like to know just how much of it is based off of like real medieval life. Like, were they really we know that there were knight soldiers who fought in wars and fought for their kings, but how much of the adventures, were real? How many, were knights just using their time to go on quests? I mean, and traveling and getting rewards for those quests. Jousting, of course, is a big thing. Tons of jousting tournaments in this book, and we know jousting tournaments were real. That was a real popular thing. Chasing beasts, chasing animals, helping damsels, saving prisoners, and just killing. There's so much killing in this book. People kill each other like it's nothing. It's like, for being such good Christian warriors, was it really so easy to end another person's life back then? It's like, again, how much of that is just fantasy? People murder each other like it's nothing in this book. The morals and dilemmas, again, for a book back in 1485, it's really interesting to see people's views on doing good deeds and good works. That there's this idea that you need to be a good human being, and I'm sure, again, I'm sure that's just embedded in human consciousness. I'm sure that's something in the dawn of time that human beings have been thinking about. But it's still fun and interesting to read it from that perspective of this time that we kind of relate to, medieval times as like, I don't know. It's not, I mean, it's romanticized in a way, but also you can look at it as this dark, gritty time period where, nobody showered or bathed and everyone was just drinking ale all the time, and, women didn't have rights or whatever, but there's still like a lot of, respect, there's respecting other people and respecting women, and women are put on a very high, pedestal in here. You don't do bad things to women, and I wonder how much of that was really happening during those times. It's nice to read that people were struggling with their flaws and imperfections, because that's something I struggle with, and I think we all struggle with still as people. It's interesting to see that even like the best knight in the world, Lancelot, has a problem, has a flaw. When knights do bad things in this book, there are usually repercussions, whether they be shamed by other knights, like Gawain kind of was for killing a woman, or, killing somebody when you shouldn't. I don't know, in general. I don't know. Like I said, there's some mixed messages in there. Like sometimes it's okay to kill, sometimes it's not. But the rape in here is like, ugh, it's a little bad. It's a little bad. It's amazing how like a king can rape a woman, and because he's a good, great king, like it's okay. Like the lady never has like a problem with it ever, you know. And then we even see women tempting men, which is a real thing. It's a real thing, sure. But it's almost like this, men have to be like, no, I won't have sex with you, knave. No, never, you temptress. And it's like, there's not too many instances in the story of women being like, yeah, I didn't want to have sex with you. That was wrong. I wish we never did this. I'm going to kill myself because of it. Like, I don't know. There's none of that. Like Sir Tor, even being from King Pellinor. King Pellinor raped a lady, and that's how Sir Tor was born. But there's no, like, shame on you in the book at all for it. So, it's interesting. Little mixed messages. And again, I want to talk about how, like, everyone has, like, extreme importance or purpose. There's a lot in this book about, like, purpose, their purpose or their destiny. They're destined to be one of the greatest knights in the world, and so they travel down that path of being one of the greatest knights, and they're praised as the greatest knight, and their bias for them, their good deeds are confirmed by other people around them, being like, yes, you are good. That was a good thing you did. There's not much about regular people, though, in daily life, I mean, except for saving random damsels, there's always some connection to something else. Like, they're always fighting an evil knight who's also one of the greatest knights, or comes from, you're fighting a knight who is a son of a great king, or, and all these these knights like Sir Tristram, Sir Percival, Sir Lancelot are all sons of kings already. So it's like I said, it would have been nice to see some more of like, oh, this peasant just came off, he's been starving, he's been struggling in his life, and he ends up being a great knight of King Arthur, and really had to fight for it, and doesn't have that lineage already to support them. Like everybody, like I said, that they mentioned is pretty much destined to do great works, and then so let's hear about them doing all these great works, Sir Beaumains was Gareth. Okay, it was later on in my notes. Yeah, like, and then there's lots of themes in this book of like having dreams and visions. Tons of dreams and visions in this book, which is interesting to read about as well. Usually wild dreams, and the fact that dreams are supposed to have purpose, according to this book. Pretty much everyone's dreams have meaning, and like I said, they have to go to a church or go to some hermit and have somebody interpret the dreams for them. More on knighthood, cavalrymen, Charlemagne, and we already talked about that. All these knights in Britons are always, of course this is like a pro-British book basically, and they're all kind of, there isn't like two sides really. Like they never come from the point of view of like a Saracen or Muslim and being like, oh well, there was there's no story of like one of the knights becoming friends with a Muslim person. There's no social justice crap. But it would have been kind of nice to see that though in a book this old. To see that people were thinking kind of like freely and openly to other ethnicities and groups of people. But no, it's pretty much just, you're British, you're great. You're not British, you're not great. Kind of feels that way, at least in the book. The Round Table has become a very famous thing, obviously. Merlin, there's a quote about the Round Table in the book. Because Merlin's the one who made the Round Table. And it says, also Merlin made the round table in token of roundness of the world. See, flat earthers, the world is round. Merlin said so. For by the round table is the world, signified by right, for all the world, Christian and heathen, repair unto the round table. And when they are chosen to be of the fellowship of the round table, they think them more blessed and more in worship than if they had gotten half the world. And ye have seen that they have lost their fathers and mothers and all of their kin, and their wives and their children, for to be of your fellowship. So signifying about the importance of being a knight of the round table, how special it really is, and the meaning it has. And your life has meaning and purpose just by being a part of that fellowship, and the risks and the sacrifices you make to be a part of that fellowship. That's what it's all about, Charlie Brown. It's for the best of the best, right? And I guess, I don't know. Again, I would like to think of, I like to think of things from the perspective of everybody's equal and nobody's better than another. But this book really goes hard into, no, there are people better than others. There are knights that are better than other knights, and there are some only knights that are worthy of the round table. Whatever. But yeah, and just to sum up also the connections to Christianity was really just a product of the times, and I've become more interested in reading about the spread of Christianity through Europe because I'm realizing just how important that was for Christianity, as it seemed to have been dying down where it was created, in the Middle East, in Jesus' times, But when it spread to Europe, that's when it became like a giant boom thing. It's kind of like when white people found Christianity, they're like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing ever. And you can look at it two different ways. It was maybe an opportunity for people in Europe to control their people. They found this thing, it talks about God, the story of life, and story of people. We can use this to control people and manipulate people. And we can create churches, that we'll give money to, and we'll collect money, and it'll just be another scheme to make money, and we'll tell people how to act and how to be. And you could think of it like that, and in a more negative light. I think there's some positive things to it though too. Without that spread of Christianity to Europe, who knows if it would spread to the Americas. And I think, I know, this is not going to be the most popular opinion, but I do think Christianity is a good thing. It is a moral barometer, and although if you might think that people don't need it, some people do. And you know how many stories you could probably read about of murderers and rapists turning their lives around and finding Jesus in prison? That's a very real thing. When people find Jesus or find God, a lot of times they get out of their old ways and out of their bad habits and start creating new habits. Whether it's real or not, it is something that influences people to do good and be good. And that's definitely had an impact on the society and human beings as a whole. And in America, principles that a lot of Americans still hold to this day, in God we trust, one nation under God. A lot of people really still believe in that, and it drives them on their path in life. And I think it's usually a good thing. I'm not saying it can't be used to manipulate people, but the poor folk in the bad side of town who still love God, and they barely can even feed their families, but they're still praying to God and trying to do the best and treating everyone good and equals and treating people as they would like people to treat them, because they've learned that from God and the Bible. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are the real Christians. Those are the true people. The true God believers. They could be poor and still love God and have faith in God, and I think that's a very important thing in our society. It's interesting how it did spread. Starting with Alexander the Great, I believe, was one of the first people to really bring that culture. I even had a little note here how it talks about how Alexander the Great did tie European and Middle Eastern culture together, and helped the Greek language to spread, which would later help spread the word of God. So very important. There's a person in this book called Joseph of Arimathea, and I don't know if this is a real person or not, but this book contributes him constantly as the one coming from the Middle East to bring Christianity and the Bible to Europe, and is the one credited for spreading Christianity. So I think that's kind of interesting. And so he becomes a big part of it, of course, as Galahad finds the body of Joseph Arimathea in the tomb and finds a shield. And that shield with the cross is a big symbol. Lots of good stuff, lots of interesting stuff, and lots of stuff that I didn't draw from it that my first time reading it from ages 17 to 20. But rereading it with my mind now at 28 years old, where I'm even more into history now and I'm even more into religion now, to read this time capsule in a way of, I look at it very historically. I do. I really look at it as mostly real, because one, it draws from so many real things, and I like thinking about that. I like thinking about people's lives back then and how they were so influenced by Christianity. Of course, we see it in all the European art. They were obsessed with it, man. They were obsessed with Mary and Joseph and Jesus. I mean, just millions of pieces of art were created because of Christianity and how it affected people. And again, affected their moral barometers, and they felt like they had to be good because Jesus said so. And I like how that's intertwined with knighthood, something so cool as putting on armor and getting a sword. Of course, not every knight's going to be for Jesus or for God, but I don't know. Rereading it from that perspective of what it was all about to be a knight during that time is very interesting, and like I said, really draws me into more of the Christian aspects of it this time around. But and I just realized I could pick up this book and just read it anytime. I really can. It's just a great book like that where I could, if I just want to escape to that little world and read a little quest or two, I can do that. And there's always going to be things I don't remember, and so there's always something new I can find probably in this book or learn about. Like I said, I've really learned a lot about being a person and just trying your best to be, as strong as you can be and as, courageous as you can be and as good as you can be to other people. I like that. I like that idea of being a good knight. And yeah, man, ever since I got into fantasy, that's really just affected my whole perception on life. Even the things of like I said, I'd like to imagine, if I was back then being a knight, and I like literally like the traveling aspect of it, the traveling on horseback through different lands. I love that. Because this book really skips a lot of those details. It'll just be like, and so he rode for 2 nights and ended up this castle, and then he rode for another 3 nights and ended up here. But it's like, okay, well, 3 days, that's a lot of like traveling. That's a lot of woods to go through. That's a lot of like, you got to find food, you got to sleep. Ever since I got into like fantasy, I've really gotten into nature. When I got into these books in 8th grade, I was also coincidentally getting into RPGs. I was getting into things like Elder Scrolls, Morrowind. I was getting into the knights and the quests and stuff. And so back then in 8th grade, I started to really appreciate nature more because I had like a lot to do with it. When you're on adventures, you're traveling. When you're on traveling, you're seeing things outside. You're seeing the sky. You're seeing sunrises and sunsets. You're seeing trees and grass and mountains and valleys. And I became obsessed with that idea of going on an adventure and traveling lands. And so I really like to imagine real England, real Britain during this time period, because you can find tons of beautiful pictures of England, man, and all of Europe, France, wherever there were, in Italy, wherever there were knights. And really imagining, and of course there's still castles, around in those places. So I really like to imagine, just traveling England and traveling the beautiful fields and going to the coast and seeing a castle on the coast and staying at a castle for the night. And I really love to imagine that stuff. And finding out about King Arthur really opened up my mind even more to those kinds of ideas. And like I said, it's transferred to my real life really well, or translated really well into when I go outside now. I just look at the sky for a little bit. I listen to the birds. I look at the wind blowing through the trees, and I go, oh, yes, I'm on an adventure, I'm on a quest. I love this. I love nature now. Ever since I got into King Arthur and fantasy things and RPGs. I remember in 8th grade, while reading one of these books, I think Parsifal's Page, one of Gerald Morris's books, and I was waiting for my mom to pick me up from school. And for the first and I think only time ever, I sat under a tree at school. It was a beautiful day, and the birds were chirping. And I opened the book up, and I was like, "This is awesome!" And I read a book under a tree outside, dude. And it just felt that alone felt adventurous. And I really became obsessed with nature. I started going on walks when I discovered these books in 8th grade. I started walking around my neighborhood just to again hear the birds. I started watching sunsets. Like I just started to really notice all those things more. The beautiful world that we're in, the beautiful land that we're on, and all the beautiful nature that I believe God created for us to love and observe. That's also what this book did for me, and these stories did for me. Oh man, I think we're still recording. I think everything worked out. Sorry if this was not the best one. Like I said, I had 30 minutes worth of stuff that I had to kind of rewind and try to track back over. As well as I did a whole hour and a half, like a week ago of this. And so I'm doing this again. I hope this turns out to be a good one. This was a long one in the works, boy. Possibly the longest one in the works. The other one that took me this long was probably my Bill Cooper one. So and that's still one of my favorite Deep Thoughts episodes. Oh man, it's good to cast, boy. It feels good to cast. Hopefully I do another one of these soon. I'll be working real hard to edit this. I want to put in plenty of good, cool pictures and stuff. Hope you guys learned a little bit about King Arthur and Morte D Arthur. And, get into some King Arthur stories if you're looking for some good old fantasy adventure. That's going to be it for today's episode of Deep Thoughts. It's a beautiful day. I got the next couple of days ahead of me to do things. And hopefully I make the best use of my time. I love you guys. Remember to think freely, think often. And I will see you on the next episode of Deep Thoughts. Have a wonderful day.